This stopped being your home the day your father died. I want you gone by morning." She said it like she was reading off a grocery list. Flat, final. My stepmother Diane stood in the hallway pointing at 2 black garbage bags sitting by the front door. Behind her, my stepbrother Derek leaned against the wall with a small smile on his face. He didn't say a word. He didn't need to. I stood there in the house I grew up in, and I thought, I had nowhere to go. But what she didn't know was that she'd just made the biggest mistake of her life. My name is Colleen. I'm 37 years old, and I grew up in a mid-sized town in Ohio. My dad was a quiet man, a contractor, the kind of person who showed up early, stayed late, and never once asked for applause. He remarried when I was 9, and just like that, our small world got bigger in ways I wasn't ready for. I became the invisible daughter pretty fast after that. Not the one who got the praise at dinner, not the one who got the tuition help, or the birthday cake with candles, or the proud announcement at family gatherings. That was Derek. Always Derek. He walked into every room like the answer to a question nobody had asked, and everyone treated him that way. The prize child. The one they pointed to when they wanted to feel like they'd done something right. My dad loved me. I want to be clear about that. He loved me in his quiet, steady way, but he hated conflict more than almost anything else. And Diane figured that out early. She learned how to work his silence like an instrument, and over the years, she got very good at it. I didn't sit around feeling sorry for myself, and I put myself through community college, built a career in local television production. Not on camera, behind the scenes, editing, producing, learning every piece of the process while nobody was paying attention to me. I was fine with that. I was always fine with that. I wasn't flashy, I wasn't the favorite, but I was paying attention, and I was getting very, very good at something they never bothered to notice. And if you already know what that feels like, being the one in the background, doing the work while someone else gets the credit, keep watching. This one is for you. Subscribe so you don't miss how this ends, and if this already feels familiar, go ahead and click like right now. 3 weeks after my father's funeral, I was still staying at the house. I was helping with paperwork, sorting through files, doing what needed to be done because somebody had to. I assumed I was part of whatever came next. I assumed wrong. Diane called a family meeting. Her words. I found out about it the way I found out about most things in that house. Indirectly, too late. When I walked into the kitchen, there was already a lawyer seated at the table. A man I recognized vaguely from my father's church. He had neat handwriting and a folder in front of him, and he would not look at me once throughout the entire conversation. The will had been reviewed. The house, my father's savings, his small contracting business. All of it was going to Diane. Legal, airtight, clearly planned well before anyone had even picked out a casket. I said, "Dad always said we'd figure this out together." Diane didn't miss a beat. "Your father said a lot of things, honey." But he signed what he signed. Derek was scrolling his phone. He glanced up just long enough to say, "You were never really part of this family's future, Colleen. You know that." Then he looked back down. The lawyer turned a page. He knew. I could see it in the tight set of his jaw. He knew this was wrong, and he did it anyway. I excused myself and walked to my old bedroom to breathe. The door was already open. Half the room was cleared out. A box of my father's letters to me, sitting in a garbage bag in the hallway. My mother's jewelry box, the one thing I had left of her, stuffed in alongside old notebooks like it meant nothing. Diane hadn't waited. She had started erasing me before the conversation even ended. I picked up the bag. I walked to my car. I drove away without saying a single word. I cried for exactly 45 minutes. And then I stopped. And I started thinking. The first thing I did was reach out to my father's longtime business partner, a man named Roy, who had known my dad for almost 20 years. I wasn't after money or assets. I just wanted to go by the shop and collect a few things. A photo my dad kept on his desk, a coffee mug I remembered from childhood, small things, things that mattered only to me. Roy wasn't there when I arrived. One of the other guys met me at the door and told me I couldn't come in. "Private property now," he said. He looked embarrassed saying it. Diane had already called ahead. She had moved fast, liquidating my father's business within weeks, making sure every door connected to me was closed before I could reach it. A month later, there was an aunt's birthday gathering. I went because I thought maybe family was still family on neutral ground. I was wrong about that too. The room felt different the moment I walked in. Cousins I'd known my whole life smiled too carefully, like they were measuring their words. An uncle pulled me aside near the drinks table and said quietly, "Diane says you've been causing trouble over the will. Might be better to give it some space." I hadn't said a single word publicly. Not one post, not one phone call, not one conversation about any of it. Diane had worked the room before I arrived. She had already written the story, cast herself as the reasonable one, and handed out the script. I sat alone at the edge of the party and watched her laugh with people who used to be my family too. The sound of it, all that warm, easy laughter, was the only thing louder than the hum of the refrigerator behind me. Then came the digital piece, and somehow that one stung the sharpest. My father had created a private Facebook group years ago, a family archive, photos going back decades. Somehow, it had been quietly transferred to Diane's control. I was removed without notice. Old pictures of me with my dad began disappearing from the archive. Then Derek posted a tribute to my father. A big photo, heartfelt caption, the whole family in the picture. I was cropped out. It got 200 likes. Not one person said anything. Not one person asked where I was. I didn't comment, didn't call anyone, didn't beg to be believed by people who had already chosen their side. Instead, I found a small apartment. I picked up extra freelance editing work. I got very quiet and I got very focused. I realized something. They were fighting over the past. I still had a future. What they didn't know, what none of them ever thought to ask about, was what I had been doing with my nights and weekends for the past 2 years. There was a project, something I had built entirely on my own, outside of my day job, outside of anything connected to my family name. A documentary short. I produced it, edited it, shaped every frame of it myself, and when I submitted it to a regional film festival, I used my mother's maiden name. Not my married name, not the name Diane associated with me, my mother's name, the one Diane never knew. What they didn't know was I had been building something, quietly, without asking anyone's permission. The documentary was personal. It was about working-class families, about inheritance. It was about what gets passed down and what gets taken. I hadn't planned it as a response to what happened. I had started it long before my father got sick. But life has a way of making your work more honest than you intended it to be. The festival confirmed my entry. I was sitting alone in my apartment when the email came through. No party, no announcement. I just exhaled slowly and closed my laptop. There was something else building too. The local news station where I worked part-time was expanding. A new segment, human interest, community stories. My boss had been watching my editing work for months. He hadn't said anything yet, but I could feel the attention in the way he lingered near the edit bay, the way he'd pause and watch a sequence I'd cut before moving on. I had a plan they never saw coming, not because I was scheming, but because I had never stopped working. And work, it turns out, is louder than anything Diane could ever say about me. I wasn't alone through all of it. I want to be honest about that. My cousin Patrice reached out about 6 weeks after the family photo incident. She was my father's niece from his side of the family, always the difficult one at gatherings, because she had a habit of asking the questions everyone else pretended not to notice. She texted me one afternoon. No preamble. "I saw what they did with that photo. I'm sorry. I know you didn't deserve that." That was it. 6 words of acknowledgement, and it mattered more than I expected. Patrice wasn't wealthy. She didn't have connections or influence, but she was present, and she still had access to spaces I'd been cut out of. She started passing me information. In not gossip exactly, but context. She told me Diane was already talking about selling the house. She told me Derek had been telling people I had walked away from the family voluntarily. that the distance was my choice. We met for coffee regularly after that. Small place near her work, always the same corner table. She'd wrap her hands around her mug and say the things I needed to hear without making them feel like charity. Once she looked at me and said, "You've always been the one actually doing something. They've just been too busy looking down at you to look up and see it." I held on to that. Meanwhile, Diane was redecorating. She was posting the transformation of my childhood home to social media, before and after photos of rooms I used to know, tagging Derek in every post, thanking her son for his support. Derek gave a small interview to a local business paper about taking over his father's legacy. He spoke about the family. He mentioned Diane by name. He did not mention me once. They had stopped thinking about me. I had become a closed chapter to them, someone they'd handled and moved past. They were certain, comfortable, fully settled into the belief that I was simply gone. The more invisible they thought I was, the closer I was getting to being seen by everyone else. The Regional Film Festival made a broadcast deal with a local PBS affiliate. 3 documentary shorts selected for a Sunday evening feature segment. Mine was one of them. I watched it at Patrice's apartment. We sat on her couch with takeout going cold on the coffee table, and we watched my name appear on the screen. My full name, my mother's maiden name, and then my face. Briefly, in a behind-the-scenes interview clip I had almost cut from the final submission. The segment host called me an emerging voice in community storytelling. Patrice grabbed my arm and didn't let go. Diane saw it while flipping channels. She didn't recognize the name at first. Then she did. She called Derek. Derek called 2 cousins. Within the hour, my phone was buzzing. The first message was from Derek. "Hey, saw something on TV. Is that you?" I put my phone face down on the cushion next to me. I let it sit. Then Diane called. I picked up. She said, "Colleen, I had no idea you were doing something like this. Why didn't you tell us?" I said, "You packed my mother's jewelry into a garbage bag, Diane. When exactly was I supposed to bring it up?" A pause. Then her voice shifted into something softer, more careful. "That was a hard time for all of us. We could have handled things better." "You already handled it," I said. "I'm good with how things are now." "We're still family, Colleen." I looked across the room at Patrice, who was watching me with quiet eyes. "You said this stopped being my home the day my dad died," I told Diane. "I believed you. Turns out it was the best thing you ever did for me." And I hung up. The documentary received a jury mention at the festival. 2 weeks later, my boss at the station sat me down and offered me a full on-camera producing role for the new community segment. My face, my name, my stories. Patrice texted me a screenshot the next morning. Diane had liked the PBS Facebook post about the documentary. No comment, just a like. We both laughed about it for a while, and then I put my phone away and went back to work. I didn't post about any of it. I didn't need to. The world had already seen it without me saying a word. 6 months later, I was producing a full segment series. My name in the credits every single week. My vision on screen, reaching people I'd never met in towns I'd never been to. My father's house sold in the spring. I drove past it once on a gray Tuesday afternoon. I let myself feel the weight of it, the memories pressed into those walls, the particular smell of the garage where my dad used to work, motor oil and sawdust and old coffee. I felt all of it. Then I kept driving. My mother's jewelry box came back to me. Patrice had found it in a donation pile Diane had dropped at a church thrift store. She'd quietly held onto it for months before telling me. That detail hit harder than anything Diane had ever said to my face. Harder than the garbage bags, harder than the lawyer who wouldn't look at me. The idea that she had let it go so casually, that it meant so little to her, told me everything I needed to know about what kind of person she was. Derek sent me a LinkedIn connection request 8 months after the broadcast. I let it sit in pending. Diane stopped posting about the house after the sale. Her social presence got quieter, smaller. I noticed, and then I stopped noticing. She threw me out to make room for a life she wanted. What she didn't know was, she threw me straight into the life I was supposed to have. If you've ever been made to feel like you didn't belong in your own family, Like your history was something that could be cropped out of a photo or stuffed into a garbage bag and left in a hallway, I want to hear from you. Share your story in the comments. You are not alone in this, and click like to help this story reach others who need it. If this story stayed with you, there's more where that came from. Every week we tell the stories that don't get told anywhere else. The ones about being overlooked, underestimated, and quietly powerful. Subscribe so you never miss one. And if you know someone who needs to hear that being pushed out isn't the end, share this with them today. They'll thank you for it.